In this video, we're going to cover the process that I would follow to fully reinforce the Warren 512 Pier number 2 Iowa DOT structure. So to begin, and again, this is just the process that I would follow if I was in practice here, but I would definitely start out with the footing. So let's go to the Home tab of the concrete workflow and open up our pad footing reinforcement dialog. And I'm just going to use the drawings that I was provided here to fill out my form. It should already be pretty close from testing. So top cover 4 inches, bottom cover 3 inches. Uncertain of the side cover, so I'm just going to go with 2. For our top reinforcement, obviously we're going to need 23 short bars, so 23 short way here. 28 short way for the bottom bars, number 8s, number 5s on the top, with a 6-inch start offset on the and end offset for our top reinforcement, and a 3-inch start and end offset for our bottom reinforcement. Go over to our long direction reinforcement, and again we have a 6-inch start offset for our top reinforcement, so top long way 6-inch, bottom long way 8.5-inch. So that's where that's coming from. And then our quantities: 9 top long way bars, 14 bottom long direction bars, both 8 and 5. In conditions, we don't need any at this time, and we're not going to use the dowels of the pad footing reinforcement dialog to create our dowels in the model here. So the only thing that remains is to go to the assignment tab, and utilizing the description file, in addition to a setting that has to be applied by the user, the level will be applied from the selected description as opposed to the level you see here. So if I go ahead and I select my active concrete, you'll see that the reinforcement that was modeled is placed on the level SR, R-bar, P, F, T, G, pad footing, as opposed to what's been selected here. This actually has no effect over the bars in the model when we're utilizing the description file. And one thing about that is, in order to be able to utilize the description file, the user will need to make sure that within their file settings, global settings for ProStructure's global settings, on the options category, they have the assign description level checkbox enabled. So enabling this will allow you to apply the level to the reinforcement from that description. Alright, now that we've got the footing reinforced, we're going to move our way up. Now typically we'd move to dowels, but considering we're going to be modeling the dowels differently, I'm going to just go straight to the column, because the column reinforcement will actually serve as a sort of a guideline or a snap point for me to use whenever I'm placing my guidelines for my dowels. So I'm going to open up the column reinforcing dialog. And just to see what happens whenever I try to model column reinforcement within this next solid here, I'm going to go ahead and just select it. So right now I've got 1 bar in there. Let me see, I'm going to get at least the 4 corners in. That way I can see what it's recognizing as the outside of column. And it looks like it's actually going to work to our benefit in this case, because it seems as though it's seeing just the interior rectangular solid, not the sides, the half-cylinder sides, as the solid element. I'm guessing those were combined after the centerpiece was modeled, so the program's only really viewing that center geometry. Now I will need to probably apply a little bit of a bottom clearance to this just to get these bars up 2 inches here. So this again at the bottom there on our AccuDraw dialog, you can see 2 inches, so I'm going to come over here and I can apply either a clearance to the bottom of the column to accomplish this, or I can just apply a bottom offset. Now I'm going to apply it on the clearance tab, just because that will also affect any ties or stirrups that I may be modeling. Now next thing, I know I need 17 spaces. Let me move over to my column here. 17 spaces, so 18 bars on the long face, and 2-inch clearance on the long face. Now the short face is a little bit different here, and we're going to have to do some additional modification there to get what we need. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight the column and the reinforcement inside of it, then hold down my right mouse button and go to Display Set to create an isolation. I'm going to rotate to the top, and the important part about these short face is that we need to make sure that our bars land where they're called for on the structural drawing. So if we look here, it appears as though it's a 1/2 inch to the outside face of that first corner bar from the end of the radius segment there. So I'm going to go ahead and just place some guidelines here to show, or to be able to give myself a point of reference here for the end of that radius segment. And I know that this first bar needs to be a 1/2 inch from that line, and the last bar needs to be a 1/2 inch from the line on the opposite side though. So I'm going to uncheck my opposite bar quantity for my short face here within the column reinforcing dialog. And the reason I'm doing that is that it allows me to customize the clearance for each end individually. So I'm going to start with the first clearance here, and I'm just going to put in 0 and see what happens. Now, I can come back out here and check, and you'll notice that it isn't exactly at 0. That's because I have a bar size selected for my ties. If I go over to my ties tab, you'll see it's a bar size 4 that's already been applied. If I change this to, let's say, an 8, you'll notice that the bars adjust. So it is taking that into account, and it actually kind of works to our benefit in this case because of the 1/2 inch offset. So we can keep that at 0, and our first bar is perfect. Now we're going to go over to our last bar of this rectangular portion. Go back to my column info, and what happens if I put 0? So 0 is the easiest thing to figure, and then I can just add to that to make further adjustments. So what we need here is for the outside face of this bar to be 1/2 inch from the and we should have our, let's see here, our 1/2 inch. So we're good. Now next up, I'm going to go to my vertical reinforcing tab and make sure that my bar size is proper. So let's go ahead and increase that to 10. Double check our values. Now that I've changed my bar size, I might need to make an additional adjustment. I'm going to go ahead and add an additional 1/4 inch to that. Hindsight, probably should have changed the bar size prior, but we should still be good on this side because we are using the bar size 4 for our ties, so we're still at a 1/2 inch. Good. Alright, now with those 4 bars in, I'm going to go to my vertical reinforcing tab. We definitely have the slots for 18, and it's much easier just to add it to all of them at once. So I click the first icon there, insert this bar at all locations, and then referencing my structural drawings, I see I need a 3'3" embedment, so I can go ahead and rename these if I want to, call them 10D2s, just for posterity, and 3'3" embedment, no top end condition, no bottom end condition. And we're actually going to do something different here because we don't actually need those corner bars in order to draw our ties. So the biggest benefit of using the column reinforcing dialog is that it's going to allow us to get all of these interior ties modeled in extremely quick. So in order to model all these interior ties, really we only need the second bar in on each face. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those 4 corners, and you'll see it kind of overlapped with the variable or the label there within our preview. So if you wanted to keep it shorter, that wouldn't hurt, but looks like we're good. Now I'm going to go to my ties tab. We need a single zone, bar size 4 with 1 foot spacing, and we need our first bar to be at 6 inches and our last bar to be at 6 inches. So I'm going to change my start and end offset here. Make sure my location is set to middle. And then I'm going to look down here and realize that I need 1, 2, 3, 4 ties. So let's start with the first one. I'm just going to call this, let's see, what are they? 4E1s. So I'm going to say 4E1. Start in condition 90-degree hook, end condition 90-degree hook. And this is going to go from here, here, draw 6, up, and back. Now our next one is going to go 3 down from that, so call this 4E1. I'm going to put a little A on the end just so I know. I'm going to offset it up 1 bar diameter, 90-degree hooks on both ends, and we're going to go from here, across 3, 6, up, and back. So we've gotten our first and our second tie taken care of. Now it looks like we need to go back 2 and over 6, so I'm going to create my third tie here. So this will be for E1. No offset on this one, it'll be below that tie. 90-degree hook on each end. And we're going to grab the second one over, down, across the 6th, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up and back. And then finally our last tie for E1C. Now apply the offset to it and 90-degree hooks on both ends. And this one will wrap from here, down, across, and back. And I can check and make sure that everything looks good so far. So far, so good. I'm going to go to my assignment tab and make sure that I have a good description selected here so it goes on the right, a nice level. So let's say rebar column, accept, and now my reinforcement is modeled there with the level of SR R-bar columns. All right, now I'm ready to get my next bars in, or the corner bars here, the ones around the radius edges. So what I'm going to do is actually take this solid and extract the face so that I can get that geometry real quick and easy, and then just trim it as needed. So I'm going to switch over to my modeling tab, go over to my solids and extract face. And I do want to extract the face. I could do edges, but considering I'm going to need this face for my dowels, I'm just going to extract the face entirely. Now, before I start doing work on this face, I am going to drop it 1 time, just because whenever I extracted it, it grabbed that inside polyline as well, and I don't want that for that keyway there. So I'm just going to drop it 1 time with the complex option turned on. I can turn off the line screen shapes and shared cells there, and I can get rid of that interior guideline that it pulled for me. And now I'm going to rotate a little bit up, and I'm going to copy this line parallel, or move parallel inwards. I can make a copy if I'd like, it isn't necessary, but I'm just going to move it inwards using the existing bars in there as my point of reference. So now there's my center line for all of my verticals, and if I want, I can, what I'm going to do is actually change my color here so that I can see the difference between my vertical guideline and my stirrup or tie guideline. And I'm going to copy parallel again using the use active attributes with make copy turned on. Grab my guideline there, and I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard to smart lock. And then what I need to do is just snap to a center point of one of these ties. So right there, looks good. So there we go. Now we have our vertical guideline and our tie guideline. So I'm going to go ahead and get this vertical guideline modified so that it fulfills my needs. So I'm going to rotate to the top here. And if I recall, I need the outside edge of this last bar to be a 1/2 inch over from where this radius starts. So I'm going to do a 1/2 bar diameter plus 1/2 inch in order to locate, because I will be using Irregular Dispatch for these verticals, and I don't want to have to worry about offsets or anything like that. So I'm going to shift this over 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to shift it over 5/8 of an inch, which is 1/2 bar diameter for a number 10 bar. 5/8 is half of 10/8. And then I'm going to come over here to this line, and let's see what we need to do to it. It actually just needs to shift to our right 1/8 of an inch. So because 1/2 is 4/8 and we need 5/8, I'm just going to come over 1/8. So now for our number 10 bar, we should be a good 1/2 inch over from the end of that radius. Now, using these two lines, I'm going to highlight them, and I'm going to use break element with by element. Now, because I didn't have by element selected whenever I started, I deselected them, so if I run this tool again, break element, you see it keeps them selected and has them highlighted as the cutting elements. Now I'm going to go in and select my vertical guideline there, left click once to accept, and get rid of my slicing guidelines there. So now I have my end vertical guidelines for my irregular dispatch. I'm going to get rid of my other guidelines since I don't need them for my the verticals we already took care of. And I'm going to highlight both of these, rotate to a front view, and copy them from the bottom all the way to the top of bar. Next up, I'm going to rotate just a hair so that I can get every point I need just by zooming and whenever I am modeling my irregular dispatch. So back to the Concrete tab, irregular dispatch tool, bar size 10. I can start off with a spacing here, so let's say 10-inch spacing 0, but I'm probably going to need to override it to get the exact quantity that I want in there. So for my in conditions tab, get rid of my hooks here. Don't need any hooks for my verticals. And then on my assignment tab, I'm going to make sure I have a rebar column selected. Select my concrete, and then choose my guidelines. So start with the bottom guideline, and then top guideline. We got 6 on that side, which is correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, we need 7, so I'm going to override this quantity and say 7. Accept. And then repeat. I could have just clicked the save button to save myself some time there, but we do. So bottom to top. I click to accept, and let's see how many we need on this side. We need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as well. So I'm going to go ahead and override the quantity with 7. Accept. And we have our verticals in. Now, we also need to place our dowels in here, so what I'm going to do is take my guideline here and do another copy parallel. And I'm going to copy it right back to where we were at with our vertical guidelines, because our dowels are going to be sitting directly next to our verticals. Just going to put that there for now, and I'll take care of that in just a minute. But while we're working on the column, I'm going to knock out our ties. So rotate to the top, and let's see what we need to do for our ties. So our ties, we just need the 2 ends, and they need to wrap around 3 of the bars that the column inserted. So this one will have to stop somewhere around here, and this one will come over and wrap around 3 as well, so right about here. Now, as I mentioned before, these are for the center line of our our ties. So what I'm gonna do is actually move them to center line of bar right now, and one at a time. And then I'm going to use a different tie that's already in place to position this guideline exactly where I need it. So I'm going to snap to the center here, move to the center of that. And there we go. We'll move this one over here, and then shift it back out to there, and pull it across. Alright, so now I know that I need to trim this guideline here to these edges, and then I'm going to use this to create my single rebar distribution. So let me go ahead and just for a moment turn off my concrete rebar, my column rebar. So SR bar columns, good. And I'm going to change the color of this guideline just so I don't get it confused. So in the properties tab here, let's do a -1 to go back to by level. And then let's break our stirrup guideline there by the 2 we placed here. So highlight these and go to break element, tie elements, and select the outside tie guideline, click, and get rid of everything we don't need here. Now, we could either trace these bars, or you could insert a vertex and modify it that way, but basically we just need to add another leg to this tie. but I'm just going to come over here, and pretty simple to follow the lines here and get this guideline placed precisely how I want it to be, so that the bar ends are created exactly where they should be. So I'm just going to come back over here, and I'm going to actually add on a half bar diameter to this guideline. So back down to here, I'm going to say plus 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 dot 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 25. So that adds on a 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this end, come across to here. Oops, one more period there, 25. Good deal. And now let me go ahead and just mirror this now. Back this way. And I can just fine tune the location as needed. So it looks like it needs to shift over to there. So I'm going to use my stretch tool. Stretch, grab just the ends of these bars. Stretch from here back to, there's the end of that one. See that intersection snap is provided. And delete the unnecessary guidelines that we've placed. And let me turn my column reinforcement back on. Double check that we're still in a good place. Good deal. All right, so now I need to place a guideline for my distribution path. I'm going to start with the first tie, center point. Go to a front view here, there we go. Up to the last one. So, the last tie in the set, probably easiest to snap to where I first snapped to. There we go. There's one distribution path. And the other distribution path will be identical. I'm probably going to take this back over here to ties guideline, just try to keep them together so that I know what belongs to which. And I'm going to lift this up to be right in the same plane with the tie second over. That way, you know, we still get that stacking appearance. And one more time for the opposite side. This one will actually be moving up to same elevation as this tie. There's the center point. Back to a front to check. And lastly, copy that same dispatch path over here. Now I could have used the same guideline element for the path on both of these, no problem with that. Just sometimes it's easier to for each rebar set to have its own path. So with that in place, now I'm going to open up my single rebar distribution, turn my concrete level back on. Looks like it got off there. And I'm going to choose bar size 4. I want it to be a stirrup. 1 foot spacing, no start and end offset is required since I have the guidelines modeled where the first one needs to start at and it ends at the last one. And if I want to provide any sort of insertion alignment here for the guideline, now that would be in the case that I had a closed or in this case a polyline shape. It would, you know, shift the bar inside of, outside of, or on the center line of the selected guideline. I do want center line, that's how I placed my guideline, so I'm going to keep it there. The zone is just for information purposes. It will actually apply a rebar zone data to these bars so that additional information can be pulled into, like, let's say the schedule generator tool, inferring zone as in top, bottom, left, right, as well as you can modify the view here by hiding bars of a specific zone, so if that was the case. Now, first thing I'm going to do is select my concrete. I'm going to go over to my assignment tab just because if I do it now I won't have to do it later. Rebar column. Come back to my rebar tab. Make sure my in conditions are set up properly, 90-degree hooks. And now it's just a process of selecting my bar guideline and my path guideline. There's my first set. I'm going to hit save. Select my concrete again. Select my bar guideline on the opposite end and my path guideline there. Everything's looking good. Check mark. And now we're ready to move on to our dowels. Alright, picking back up with our dowels here. We will need to do something a little irregular with these now. What I need to do, since I do have a different spacing for my verticals around the radial edge here versus my verticals along the linear edge, I'm going to need to do this in 4 pieces just because there's no way for me to apply that multi-spacing sort of idea to these. Now I could attempt this, but what I would want to do beforehand is make sure that this segment, each segment ended, where a bar ended. So if I wanted this one to be, let's see, how far we're off were we? So we're off to the edge just a hair. So if I wanted this one to go to there, actually let me pull this one back first to there. And now I'm going to extend this out. One thing, I will need to do this for the remainder of those as well, so I could just use copy parallel to accomplish this really quickly. I can go ahead and do that at this time. So I'm going to move parallel back to there, and let's get rid of the we don't need. Shift this one up, front, and 5'5" up, which is right here. Rid of the one we don't need. And now let's see what happens whenever we attempt to use our irregular dispatch. So I'm going to go into irregular dispatch, and I'm going to make sure my method here is set to combo since we need combination spacing. And then I'm going to select my concrete, so it's going to be poured with the footing. I want it to apply to the footing. And now I'm going to choose my guidelines. So first into my second, which is the interior one. Looks like I need to create that one real quick. For some reason it didn't get copied parallel, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this one down to here and continue picking second and then my third, and it looks like I have some in condition applied, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that and say none and check out my quantities here. So I know I need 17 on each face and 7 on the corners. So let's see, I'm going to rotate to a top view, and for my segment 1, I'm going to override this quantity, and let's say 17. With a end offset of bar diameter. That's good. And then on my end, I know that quantity is 7. I can still utilize that same end offset. I might want to utilize a start offset in this case, but now you'll notice with end offsets utilized, it will shift bars for each set. So there may be instances like this one where it's easier just to do it in pieces, to do, maybe our linear faces all at once. Wrong one there, might need 16. 17 is definitely the number. And then, let's see what's left here, 7. Actually, 18, because it goes from first to last. There we go. Now, utilizing any of the reinforcement manipulation tools, we can shift these bars over if it's absolutely necessary for them to be presented as side by side. I could also modify these guidelines and do them in pieces, but again, this gets me the correct bars that I need in the quickest manner possible. So maybe they need to be adjusted, but I know that I'm going to be able to adjust them, or the adjustment isn't necessary enough for it to actually have an impact on the constructability of the structure here. So moving up, we're on to our beam at the top. So I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to go ahead and try out my beam. So let's go to my beam reinforcing. Go into the beam reinforcing. And for this one, I'm just going to clear out my settings. Actually, looking at this beam, it seems as though we need 2 layers. And I know I have a favorite in here that from the bridge training. if I go to look at my longitudinal reinforcing, I know it has 2 top layers and bottom layers. I can go ahead and get rid of that second bottom layer. I'm probably going to need to modify our clearance for the top layer to incorporate that 4 inches there, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And I know that my top bars are going to be number 11s, bottom bars are going to need to be number 8s, so I can adjust that now as well. And other than that, I'm just going to try to select my beam and see what happens. So after selecting the beam, I can see it's utilizing the, I guess, the greatest possible geometry here available, and I need to make some adjustments to get these bars to be where they need to be, as shown on the on this drawing here. So I need 3.5 inch to center line of top bar from the lowest point. So currently, if I go to my beam defaults tab, what I'm going to do for my top is just zero it out. Then there's no question about how far down I need to go. So I'm going to set my origin. I'm activating Smartline, setting my origin here, and hitting Smart Lock by hitting enter on my keyboard, and I'm going to go down 3.5 inches. Oops. Let's delete that out. When I be entering down into my ACS here, so 3.5 inches. Click one time to begin drawing my line there, and I'm going to see, okay, so I need, looks like we're about 5 9/16 or 5.5 inches off from where we should be. So real quick, I'm going to come in here and say 5.5, hit tab, and let me see. So we should be about 3 7/16. I mean, if you wanted to add, if you really wanted it to be precise, you could shift it down to, looks like we're bouncing around a 1/16 off from a half, so that's good enough in my opinion. Now clearly we won't be able to use the ties or stirrups on each end of the sloping part of this beam, but these stirrups that the beam tool is modeling are going to be really helpful in allowing us to get these sloping stirrups modeled in. So next up, I'm going to go to my Longitudinal Reinforcing tab. Actually, no, I need to modify my bottom bars, so let's do that now. At the bottom, looks like 3.5 inches to centerline that bar as well, so I'm going to go ahead and zero out my bottom. Not sure which surface or edge it's being or is recognizing as bottom, and I'm going to pull a line from there to 3 point. Actually, I apologize. Let's try that again. I'm going to pull it from the center line of the bar. Center line of the lower bar. Back to a front view here and Smart Lock. And basically I want to come over in tentative or just snap help there. Looks like that's 1 inches. So that makes it easy, 4.5. So let's try that, 4.5. And I can come back out here and just double check myself to make sure that I've got the 3.5 I need. Looks good. 5/8, I'm assuming this lower one is 3.5. Now the reason you're seeing them like one a little higher than the other is just because the beam modeling tool does a little adjustment to longitudinal bars to get them placed exactly where they need to be for these ties. You'll see it kind of shifts them up and over in respect to each other, just because for presentation purposes only, really. So just in case you were wondering. Now back to a front view. Our longitudinal reinforcement is at the right location, with the exception for our bottom bars. We need to do a little adjustment there, but I can go over to my longitudinal reinforcing tab, and it looks like I need to get rid of my 90-degree hooks for my top bars there, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll up or hit in to get to that none field, and I could actually get rid of that second layer, or I can continue to use it. Totally up to you. The label that you apply to them can be drawn into future versions of the schedule generator tool, so in the case that you do have, you know, let's say we wanted to call this, for an instance like this, 11A1, and we wanted to call these 11A2s, obviously I would suggest doing this after you get them inserted into your diagram here, just because whenever that label is that long, it tends to run over a bit. And then on our bottom we have 8E1 1. So 8B1. And now we need to also adjust our beam longitudinal bar quantities. So we're going to have 4 bottom bars and 7 top bars on each layer, each of the 2 layers here. And should be good. Now I will adjust the offset for this here so that they're at the same length. And I'm ready to continue. Looks like we have a varied spacing. So predominantly in this area we're looking at about a 1 foot spacing. So that makes it easy. Maybe some additional 6-inch spacings towards the end. So yeah, we can go ahead and add and use that zone. We'll call it Z1 here and Z2. Bar size 4, and actually this will be Z3, I apologize. And we're just going to go ahead and modify our zone 1 to be at the start. Our spacing is going to be 6 inches. It's going to start at 11 foot 9, and that'll be our first. We need 1, 2, 3 more to show up, so that's 1 foot 6. In case you ever need to do math. Within MicroStation, it helps to just use the AccuDraw dialog. So let's say 11 foot 9 plus 1.5 is 13 foot 3. And then our next zone 2 is going to be 14 foot 3. The great thing about this is that it's going to be the same on each side with a 1 foot spacing. And we can use those same numbers that we determined for zone 1 for zone 3. So back to the 6-inch spacing. We've got a start offset of 11 foot 9 and an end offset of 13 foot 3. And now I'm going to draw my strips within just a single zone, zone 2 here. And I'm going to need 2 strips, so 2 5C1s. Looks like 2 T2s, so I'm just going to hit plus twice. Call this 5C1. Bar size 5 all the way around. Let's adjust that real quick. And this will also be a 5C1, but let's get the first one drawn in first here. Is begin drawing it. So top to the bottom, over, up, and back. And now apply my 90-degree hooks. And click on my second one. This is a 5C1A, I'm going to call it, and adjust it up 1 bar diameter, 90-degree hooks on both ends, and finish out our eyes here. And before I continue, looks like I need to adjust. Never made that change to make it at the end there. So now we have our 1 foot spacing in the middle, 6-inch spacing, both ends. And now we go into a, it looks like 10-inch spacing all the way down to the end with our tapering sets. So, looks like we're ready to adjust our bottom bars. So, having said that, we're going to rotate to a, now if I wanted to, I could make a little bit of adjustment if you want to pull this edge back further. You know, maybe make this 11 foot 10. And 11 foot 10 for zone 1 here. Just to fine tune the first and last bar of these sets. And then I'm going to go back to my Longitudinal Reinforcing tab. First thing I'm going to do is I need to figure out what the angle of this line is. So as I pull across here, you can look in my AccuDraw dialog down here. In the case that you're in an XYZ compass, you can hit M on your keyboard to switch to a radial or a polar compass there, angular compass, and I can see that the angle is 3.173. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just place that line there, and I'm going to move it up to the center line of the bar. And the reason I'm doing this is to obtain the bar length. So I'm going to pull this across and Place it at that intersection, and if I look, I can see it's about 11 foot 9 3/4. So I know 13 degrees, 11 foot 9 3/4. I can leave my guidelines in there for now. And for my bottom bars, I'm going to apply a start and in or left and right offset to this continuous bar to be negative 11 foot 9 and negative 11 foot 9, which, if you'll recall, is the sloping ends. So that pulls us all the way back in. We're no longer breaking clearance, and now all we need to do is add on to the ends of the bar. So in both cases, I'm going to use the user in condition. Hit the little settings button there next to the next of it. Zero out the second bend settings. We only need one bend. Turn off our EC reduction, in condition reduction. That way it adds on to the end of the bar. Change our angle here, 13. And if I recall, our length is 11 foot 9.75. Let's see what that gives us. Hit our check mark and come and check it out. So looks pretty good. I can come up, double check the length of it. Maybe I need to shorten it just a hair. So I can come back in and let's try 1/4 instead. Maybe even more than that. So you could continue to adjust this until it was like exactly where you wanted it. I'm just going to put 8.5 and be safe. And now I just need to duplicate. So on the other end, same thing. User, hit the setting, zero out our second bend information, turn off our EC reduction, change the angle to 13, and our length to now 11 foot 8.5. And check mark. Come over here and check it, and looking good. Now we may need to apply a bit more of a, if you see where the actual bar end is at, so I might want to apply a bit more of an end offset here just to shift those bars back and get them within. That might be why we were seeing the bars being so long versus the 11 foot 9 that we measured before. So just keep that in mind too. Sometimes when it adds on, you need to incorporate that half or that little part of the bend there just to be 100% accurate. But now that we have all of those bars in, we can actually come over to our assignment tab, SR bar beam foundation. I can choose my level here if I want to instead, so rebar beam. And on my lap options, this is how I'm going to accomplish my bottom bar lap. So I need to change my lap location to bottom. All levels, length, I know what the length is, 2 foot 1. And manual lap location, offset from, I can say, let's see what that's giving us there. Offset from column edge. And let's say my location offset is going to be half of the beam here, 20 foot 6. So let's say 20.5. Now I might need to adjust this. Oops, 20.5. There we go. Turn my stagger laps off there. And let's just double check and make sure that my lap is at the middle of the beam. Looks good. Okay. With that done, I'm going to hit accept. And now I'm ready to model my my tapering set. So I will model my face bars probably after the fact. I'm going to use the face of the beam here to accomplish that and copy parallel and stuff like that. So I just want to knock out all the most intense stuff first. And without a doubt, that is definitely going to be our stirrups. So with that being said, the easiest way for us to get these stirrups knocked out, and well, really the only way we're going to have or be able to get these stirrups knocked out, is by utilizing irregular dispatch. Now what I'm doing right now is using the bars we've already placed as a point of reference to snap to and create myself some guidelines. So just rotating around, snapping to stuff that has already been placed. Now one thing about this is that there's 2 sets here, so I need to make sure I'm just doing 1 set. That way I don't get off linear wise. And I'm going to cheat and use my bottom beam here as my guide for getting these drawn. And I'm going to snap snap to there, and then smart lock downwards and place it at the center line of bottom bar, rotate around. Always good to rotate. Don't guess, just rotate and snap to it right on. And then pull that back across to the center line here. So now I have all 4 of my guidelines placed for that set. And I'm just going to highlight all 4 of them. And copy them over to the other set. Actually, before I do that, what I'm going to do is reinforce. So I'm going to go ahead and model my reinforcement for this set of stirrups. These are going to be bar size 5 stirrups. Make sure I go over and change my level here to beam. I do want a varied set. I can't really change the settings for our varied set. I just want them to be logically a varied set. Every single bar is going to be a different length, so there's nothing I need to worry about there. And it's going to be a 90-degree hook. Come in, select my beam, and select my guidelines. So first to my second, to my third, my fourth, back home. And go to the front, and I'm probably going to need to do a quick trim on my bottom guidelines. I didn't ever make sure that they were falling and ending at the same spot as my top guidelines, so I'm going to place that guideline from a front view vertically right there, and then just using my trim multiple. Always use trim multiple. You don't want to do it one at a time. You want to hit them all at once because it's going to update the bars every time. So I'm going to highlight my linear line there and then click and drag and extend both of those. And if I want to, I can apply a start offset. Now, because we have a sloping end in here, if I come back and apply a start offset, let's say, or actually an end offset, 1 foot, you might see a little bit of skewing going on, just because 1 foot along that top line is a little bit further down than 1 foot along this sloping line, where, you know, like similar to a hypotenuse of a bar, for instance. And just by checking this, it looks like I may need to go back and make a little bit of an adjustment to my end here. Looks like it's cutting through some of these bars, and these bars are at the proper clearance, so that's a good check. But that being said, if I needed to apply a start or end offset, and let me check and make sure my spacing is good. We are at, I believe it said 10 inches, 10 inches. Good, okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and check mark this for now. I know this set that I modeled actually started right there. So what I need to do now is come over 10 inches and place my line. And now I'm going to trim multiple, both of my guidelines there, to this line. So click, drag, top and bottom. Oops. Let's get back to the trim or extend. It was trying to extend that first time around. There we go. Now the same thing on the opposite end. If I want to, let's say, move this last, I want the last tie to be right about here. Just going to do the same thing again. Trimming both of these there. Perfect. And just while I'm at it, go ahead and knock this out. And for my bottom bars, increase our angle there to about 13.5. I bet you just that little amount is going to be sufficient, more than sufficient, you'll see. Maybe incorporate more decimals into the measurement there. Let's try 2. That's good enough, and I'm going to make the same change to the opposite side. 13.2. Good. All right, now I'm ready to finish out the rest of my stirrups here. So I'm going to get rid of those guidelines I placed and rotate to a top view and select the stirrups that I just modeled, as well as all of the guidelines associated to them. So before I do that, let me double check why these two are in a different plane. Go to a top view. And let's just take one of them and move it over to the other. Oops. Move. There. That's better. And then I can see that both of them need to be shifted out just a hair. So I'm going to go ahead and do that from there to about there. And so I'm happy with it. And the reason I'm doing all of this now is I want to get them looking perfect right now. And then I'm going to adjust for the next set. So I'm going to select all of my guidelines here. I'm doing a click and drag so that I get everything. So you see I have 4 instead of just 2. And then I also need to copy the bars. Now, I know that these bars don't need to be in the same plane with the other bar, but what I'm going to do for now is just copy them into the same plane because of these sloping lines. So once I have them copied, I'm going to select actually I know that I need to shift them over 5/8 of an inch, so I'm going to go to highlight my bars and my beam, and I'm going to display set. The reason I'm doing this is so I don't accidentally chop anything in the background. And I know that I need to go over basically 1 bar diameter. So I'm just going to use a bar here to place my guideline. And it's right there for now, and I need to shift it over from outside a bar to outside a bar. And let me extend this up just a hair. And I need the same thing to take place on the front end, so or the very end of this beam. So there we go. And now using the trim multiple with trim or extend, I'm going to select this one. I can drag over both of these, except right click 1 time to deselect that one, and now select this one. Trim off both of these. And get rid of my guidelines there. Do a display set. Actually, display set clear. I'm not going to select them yet. I'm going to make sure that they look right. Everything's looking good here. And I'm going to select it all at once. Rotate to a top view. And give it a good old mirror. Opposite end taken care of. Rotate around just to make sure everything's looking good. And now I'm ready to begin on my face reinforcement. So the face reinforcement is probably one of the more simple steps here. What I could do is just place my guideline along the bottom here. Now, as far as that offset to first horizontal bar, I believe that's given over in our section here, so 11 inches from center of the bottom bar. So, and I believe this to be at the center of beam. So what I'm going to do is turn off all the levels that I don't need real quick. Getting a little busy in here. Actually going to shift to a different guideline level. There's one for beam, perfect. And let's go by level. And turn off our levels for the column reinforcement. And should be good there. Also don't need the column concrete really. And all of the other guidelines that I've placed. We do need our beam. Don't need the pad footing. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is using this sketch here as a kind of point of reference. I need that first bar to be 11 inches from my last bottom bar. So there's the center of my last bottom bar. Go to front. Go up 11 inches. So that's my first bar. And then basically from there all the way up to the last set, it's going to be 11 inches. It looks like it switches to 10 inches. I'm assuming where these bars are able to extend all the way into the full length of the beam. So we can rotate to a front view here. And let me just go ahead and place a line here and say 11, 11, 11, oops. And then we have 10, 10. Actually just a single 10 there. And if we are correct here, roughly 10, good enough. Okay, so that's basically where our face bars need to be laying at. And I could, using this, come through and let me just place, say, a guideline. Now, this bar will need to end right here at that, so what I'm going to need to place my guideline for is clearance of beam. I'm not moving these bars in. I already have kind of their point of reference, and I'm going to create a guideline out of that. So I know exactly how many bars I need. I know where they need to end at right, for the clearance value. This is going to be center of bar, so I'm going to pull it back just a hair. Let's say to like right about there. And then these on the end are going to be even easier. So next thing I'm going to do is using this path here. So I'm going to go ahead and place that where I want my bars to end at, which is about there. You can see that that bar is going to end there. And then coming up the top here, we've got bars that end there. Now the reason I'm doing this is to capture those intersections of these lines that I've just placed, right? So I'm going to turn off my reinforcement for my beam, SR bar beam, and now I'm going to place a guideline with multiple points. Now what I'm going to do is come out here and activate my Smartline tool, which is tied to a button on my mouse. That's why it's enabling so fast. And I'm going to begin placing my point there. And now every point I click after I snap and place one point, I'm going to hit Z on my keyboard so that I don't snap to anything in a different plane. I want all of these to be planar. Click my second one, hit Z. Third one, hit Z. Fourth one, hit Z. Fifth one. And we should be, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's our fifth. Now we can get rid of everything else. Delete. Delete, delete. Should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 points there. Delete that. Perfect. And gonna mirror this right about the middle, making a copy. Rotate to a front or side view rather. Turn my beam reinforcement back on just to make sure that I've got these bars within the ties there. Looking good. And in line with the other bars. I can make a little adjustment to this after the fact. So I'm going to go ahead and model them in now using Irregular Dispatch. So I'm going to rotate back to a front view here. Irregular Dispatch, bar size 6. Not a stirrup. I'm going to use mode vertex. I apologize. Because I have a vertex everywhere a bar needs to be placed. In conditions, none needed. And assignment. Good. So now I'm going to come, select my concrete, choose my first guideline, and my second guideline. Here's my first set of face bars. Now I can accept this and rotate to the side and see if they need any adjustment, maybe shifting over just a hair to make them look like they're, right up against these ties or stirrups. I want, and then it's just a matter of selecting both the bar set and all guidelines associated to that set and doing a mirror. There's my opposite face taken care of, and all that remains now is the additional bars that are below the beam seats, or these the beams are coming in on the bridge here. So it looks like we have 4 number 5s with hooks on each end in one direction. And we have 5s in the opposite direction as well. Let's see where they are going to be called out at. 4, it looks like 4 in each direction. And we have exact spacing of them. So we have 1 foot, and it looks like 1 foot 6 and 1 foot. And 3 equal spaces in the opposite direction. So if we wanted to check the 3M1 or 5M1s there for their length, obviously I don't have much of the supplemental information in regards to the location of these sets, but I can get them pretty close. I will model a single set, probably using Irregular Dispatch, and then copy it over. Now in the case like this, I could use single rebar set. The only thing about single rebar set that might get us into trouble here is that there's no way to identify one of these or both of them as stirrup bends. And that's important because if you look on the actual drawing or the bending information for these, you can see that it is utilizing the stirrup pin diameter. So we have 3 foot 5, 1 foot 8, and in order to get that stirrup pin diameter, what we need to be able to do is place a guideline, and using either Irregular Dispatch or single rebar set distribution, you just toggle that check mark on there for stirrup. So it probably won't be that difficult to do if I come and check my bars here, it looks like we probably have a 2-inch clearance to edge of our beam there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to model, like I said, one set and then copy them over. And I can actually turn off the levels for my rebar beam, and I'm just going to interpret these bars as being centered beneath this area here in between the keyways. So divided by 2, and my z, I need to divide my distance by 2 there. Divide by 2. So there's where one set will be. And I can copy that from here to here for the other set, assuming that these are the same distance. Divided by 2, 1'9", yep. And for the center one, are we at 3'6" as well? Good. Divided by 2 is 1'9". So that will be the center point for all 3 of these sets. Like I said, I'm just getting these guidelines in there now to help myself. I'm only going to model one, and then I'm going to copy to all the other locations. So we know we need 3 equal spaces. It looks like these bars extend a little bit past the keyway, so I'm just going to call them 3'7" long bars. Makes it super simple because I can place a single line and just say 3'7", and now position this line where I need it to be. Now they are number 5, so right off the bat I need to make sure that I have my clearance values right. And for this set, we need to be 3 3/16 to center line of the 5M1 bars. That's really helpful that that's provided. So I'm going to, first things first, shift this bar over the center point there. Come on, center, snap, there we go. Let's try that again. Move, center, to here. And then rotate to a front view, move it down, and then plus an additional 3 3/16. Perfect, so that's for those. And I know that my other direction bars need to be up just 5/8 from there because it is a number 5 bar. So let me go ahead and copy this up. 625. There we go. Now for these bars, they will need to be 2-inch clear from edge, so I'm going to go ahead and move that one back here. Minus 2. And copy it to the other end, subtracting out 2. Good deal. And this first bar is going to be 3/16 from the edge, so I'm going to go ahead and shift it back to here, minus 3 3/16. And we're going to take that all the way across times 2. So our first set of reinforcement will be a single rebar distribution, bar size 5, no end conditions. Assignment for the beam. Don't know what our spacing is going to be yet, just because it says 3 equal spaces, so we can fudge around with that in a minute here, but I'm going to select my concrete, select my bar guideline as that right there, and my path. These are just our straight bars. And let me turn my, actually just for a moment, I'm going to switch the level to something that I haven't used yet so I can see the bars. Make sure they're showing up properly. Go to my front view, double check, everything's looking good. Back to the top, and accept. Actually, switch them back to column and then accept. And then irregular dispatch, same thing. I'm going to switch it real quick to different description level so I can see the bars as I'm modeling them. This time I am going to need 90-degree hooks on each end. And for my main reinforcing, I need them to be number 5s with a spacing. Now, in a case like this where I need that varied spacing, it might be beneficial to have a multiple vertices in here. So let's say if I wanted to come over 8 inches and place that, and mirror it real quick. The center. What I could do is using the insert vertex, just come and add those vertices in. 1 foot, my bad. Let me stretch that out 4 inches. And just to double check, do we have 1'7" in there, roughly? I could shift the beginning and end of these bars in a hair more if I wanted. Totally up to you. Again, I'm just using that 3'7" value that I figured a minute ago. It's probably 3'6" in the end. So we're going to copy this over to the other side so we can use the vertex method. And Control drag select to select the first guideline we placed and get rid of it. And now, as mentioned previously, switch back to our vertex method, stir up, select concrete, and choose our guidelines here. So line string, make sure you get the upper one. Oops, it's just a line, we don't want that. We want line string and line string. In conditions, rotate these down and modify them so that we have our 1 foot or whatever is calling for embedment. So let me check and see what we can find here. I might have to reference our other drawing. Looks like we're applying a 1'8" leg to those 5-in-1. So I'm going to go ahead and override our hooks here and override tail 1'8", check mark. Same thing for the opposite side. Override tail 1'8", check mark. And before I finalize this, go back and switch them to the beam level. Accept. And let's turn our beam back on. Now, before I turn my beam back on, what I'm going to do is get rid of stuff I don't need there and highlight my guidelines that I want to use to copy, right? Because I'm about to copy this to the other locations that I already have little points put for. So I'm going to highlight my guidelines there, turn my beam reinforcement back on, select the beam bars. It's like we might have lost our lower bars during the copy there. So let me go ahead and turn my bars back off real quick, probably during that delete. Again, just single rebar distribution, phi is good. Okay, no in conditions, select concrete. Select bar guideline, which is the lower one. Just gonna select bar guideline and select path guideline. And, oh, you know what? They got placed. Oh, they didn't, okay. Try that again. Select bar guideline, select path guideline. On our assignment tab, SR, let's have our beam selected. Concrete, bar guideline, followed by path. Check our beam level here, looking good. And clear our display set. There we go. We have all of our bars now modeled, so I'm going to select all of the guidelines for these reinforcements. So again, might be easier to do this part with the levels off. So I'm going to come into my level display using my SR R-bar beam off. Make sure, get back in here to these bars. Oops. What do we have here? Looks like we have two. All right, so we're just going to change the level of these bars. Assignment to be part of the beam as well. Good. And make sure all of our beam is still good. Select our guidelines that we placed for these additional bars. So we want to make sure we get them all. And then turn our beam reinforcement back on, grab our additional 2 selections there for the bars that are associated to those guidelines. And then what I'm going to do, just to make things a little bit easier, and you just kind of have to take a leap of faith here, but turn your beam reinforcement off and copy everything over. Just believing that it's happening in the background, we can double check and make sure. And we're good. So now all we need to do is maybe make a few adjustments to the location of those bars. But if they were all the same distance down from top of beam, then we should be all right. So come back and check. Looks like we should be good because we used that same 3 3/16 to center line of bars for whenever we modeled the first one. And when we copied them, we definitely copied by the same point. So if I come back here and check just to make sure, we have 4 1/8. I can adjust this up if needed. It looks like our need to just take these guidelines and take them from there up to there and back down 3 3/16. And possibly the same thing here. I might have smart locked whenever I was pulling across, which would have prevented me from being able to change elevation as I would have needed to in a case like this. So back up to here and then down 3 3/16. And just to double check that first one, maybe it was the one that was off to begin with. Nope, it's good. And there we go. Now we have fully reinforced all of Pier 2 for the Warren 512 project, and we're ready to begin creating our drawings.